Hello everyone, welcome to StraightA. Dawson here, back with another video here today, and we will be talking about the next team on our list in an NFL 32 team NFL stats prediction for 2024, and that will be the Baltimore Ravens. And I'm really excited for this one. They had a great season last year, and I cannot wait to see what they do this year. Hopefully they can kind of cross over that path to being really that big contender in the AFC, maybe even overcoming the Chiefs. Now of course they were last year, I'm not to say that they weren't, but maybe they can finally beat the Chiefs for one and take that spot as the AFC team. Either way, we'll see this next season. But before we get started talking about the Baltimore Ravens, please leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment any suggestions for future videos below. Let's get right into the video. Of course, first of all, we're going to review their depth chart, just kind of take a quick look at their overall team. Nothing too big, no big deal here. Lamar Jackson, of course, is going to be their starting quarterback, no surprise there. Derrick Henry, along with Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, will be the three running backs. I'm guessing Derrick Henry will get most, 70% of the snaps, while Justice Hill will get more of the receiving end, and Keaton Mitchell will kind of get some of the more snaps in the long runs. We'll see. This will be a very interesting thing since the Ravens in the past couple of years have pretty much split, carries. J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards has usually been the main back. More, goal line carries, stuff like that. But Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill have recently kind of coming in as a nice little triple threat in their offense. So I don't know how that running back trio will actually work out, how many snaps each person will get, and all that good stuff. So we'll see. But Derrick Henry obviously will be the main back in Baltimore. I think got Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and Nelson Aguilar. Kind of an underwhelming receiving core. Again, Zay Flowers is still proving himself. Maybe he can be that top receiver. Maybe he won't. We're not too sure. Mark Andrews coming back next season. Of course, he's one of the best tight ends in the league and has always put up impressive numbers and will probably be the #1 target for Lamar Jackson this next year. But Zay Flowers, again, has been a shootable wide receiver, so we'll see. But after that, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, a couple other receivers behind him. I mean, there's not really a whole much to talk about there. Everybody's going to get a little bit of love, but no one's going to get specifically all the love except for Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, who I love as a double threat tight end duo. Then you got the offensive line, which actually is a little bit more impressive than I originally thought. Looking at this again, I'm like, man, actually they're got a pretty good load here for the offensive line, which may go into my talk a little bit later. But I have a lot of high expectations for these offensive linemen this next year. Defensively, I mean, they're about the same, if not a little bit better. I think they could make a big splash this next year. The defense is going to do very, very well. I think their secondary is going to do very well. I mean, the Ravens in general have always been a well-coached team, and the names on here are enough to kind of put them over the edge as actually a really good offensive and defensive team. So we'll see how they kind of actually end up going this next year, but I have good expectations for the defense. Maybe not as high as last year, but still pretty good. Then we'll start off here. So what I've been doing is I've kind of just been going year by year, kind of talking about a little bit of everything. This time we're going to go piece by piece and go through each of the years. So on screen now, of course, I have 2023. Lamar Jackson, we're going to talk about him specifically. He's got 3,600 yards last season, 24 passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Very, very impressive on the rushing side of things. 800 yards, 5 touchdowns rushing. Very impressive guy. Of course, you can see the trend. Despite even last year, he'd be about 3,000 yards passing if he was healthy the whole season. Rushing yards, heaven forbid, he'd be close to 1,000 at that point. And all that good stuff. 7 interceptions. Of course, he probably would have hit by probably about 10 that season. So interesting here for Lamar Jackson there. Again, not a full season from Lamar Jackson here. 5 games missing. So he would have gotten to the 3,000, 3,500 range. Rushing yards easily close to 1,000. I would say, in 16 touchdowns, so it would have been about 21, I'd say. Interceptions would be a little bit higher that year, so we'll say 16, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, his MVP season, I believe, with 1,000+ rushing yards. Was this 2020? I think it was 2020. Of course, played most of the games. Wouldn't have quite reached 3,000 yards, but rushing yards easily over 1,000, of course. 26 touchdowns on passing, 9 interceptions. So pretty good there. Rushing touchdowns, he got 7 rushing touchdowns. In terms of rushing touchdowns for the past years, he got 2 and I think 3. So he's been actually lower in previous seasons before this season of 5 rushing touchdowns. So pretty good for Lamar Jackson, but he's always hovering around. His last season was the best season, I think. Obviously, 3,600 yards, 800 yards on the ground. I mean, he's really, really good in general. Really safe with the ball too. I think Lamar Jackson's starting to come to his own, where he's kind of using that dual threat a little bit better. And I think the coaching staff is starting to utilize that a little bit better as well, making him take less risks, but still do very, very well in the game. Either way, so very, very interesting there. Rushing yards. Now, this is going to be the interesting part. And let's go ahead and talk about the rushing side from the Baltimore Ravens. Not Derrick Henry just yet, but as we've seen from previous years, Gus Edwards, 6 touchdowns, 800 yards. Pretty all right, I guess. J.K. Dobbins, 500 yards, 2 touchdowns. So not very good year the previous year. Then you have Devonta Freeman leading the pack there, 576 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then J.K. Dobbins a year before that in the big MVP season, 9 touchdowns, 805 yards. So this has been a very on and off rushing threat. The Ravens really haven't found that guy that we're going to be the main rushing guy for them. J.K. Dobbins has been good. Gus Edwards has been good. And again, actually kind of looking at this, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins in this dual threat here was a very good duo, 1,500 yards between the two. So now it's going to be kind of curious to see, now that they have a superstar running back, where are they going to land? And especially with Lamar Jackson's running threat, how is that going to combine with Derrick Henry? Derrick Henry, past few years, of course, we won't be talking about receiving. Receiving for running backs is so unpredictable, so I'm not going to go with that as much. We've seen in the last 4 years 2,937 yards, 1,538 yards, and 1,167 yards. So it's really, really crazy the highs and lows that this man has had, and he's getting older. That's a fact of life we're going to realize. I think the Baltimore Ravens want to make sure they utilize him the best way possible. But also, I don't think they're going to run him into the ground. I think they expect him to do a lot, but I don't think they see that as they're going to have to run them. This offense for the Ravens has known to use running backs that aren't to the caliber of Derrick Henry. So will Derrick Henry, of course, get a lot of looks and a lot of different options there, and probably get more carries than the other running backs in the past? Probably. I do worry about his health, just because, again, he's getting older. But again, he's going to be a main crucial part of this offense. And how is that going to mix in with Lamar Jackson's rushing threat? Because you can't have both of them be 1,000+ rushing yards, even though we kind of expect that from both of them, is that they're going to be easily 1,000+ rushers, and it's hard having 2,000 rushing yards between two guys. It really, really is. And so will that happen? I don't think so. And a little bit of sacrifice will have to happen both ways. Lamar Jackson is getting, he's getting to a little bit older. They need to start taking care of him a little bit more and start not just letting him run wild. I'm not saying that he's not going to be Lamar Jackson, but I'm saying he's going to have to be more of a pocket passer a little bit and adapt to more of an improviser role than just pure rushing threat, at least over time. Maybe it's not this next year, but maybe it's the year after that. But I think the Ravens are a smart organization to know what they have with Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry, same case there. You want to make sure that he's going to be worth the contract that you have. So you don't want to just run him into the ground. Maybe Keaton Mitchell and Justice Hill will get a little bit more looks because they don't want to run Derrick Henry out. But Derrick Henry is so good in the red zone, why not just kind of save him for those red zone threats, or at least a majority of his snaps being in the red zone? Again, not saying that's what they should do, but why wouldn't they think that way of saying that we want to conserve these two great talents? Because we have an opening for a Super Bowl in the next 3-4 years. With Lamar Jackson being as young as he is, and the Ravens only getting better on defense, they have a lot of great contracts going on. Excuse me. Why not conserve Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson to make sure that window that you have is going to stay open? So that's kind of my hot take there. Not hot take, but my take there when it comes to this team and the rushing threats. We'll talk about it more a little bit later. But that's kind of my initial thoughts about Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and where they could possibly land. Still going to be very impressive. I look forward to seeing what Derrick Henry can do on this team, because it's going to be a very, very good team, especially in the offensive line being as good as it is. Man, I'm excited. Let's look at the receiving now. So Zay Flowers, of course, has been the number one receiver here last year. Didn't break 900 yards, but did get 5 touchdowns, pretty good. Outside of that, everybody else has been pretty much 500 and less. Now, Mark Andrews is an exception here because he did only have 10 games played, and he is he's getting a little bit older. But tight ends are really one of those positions that's really easy to kind of stay active, if that makes sense. It doesn't have to be like the injuries won't probably affect him as much as quickly, at least. So we'll see how that kind of goes. Again, looking at other previous receiving years, before Zay Flowers now, Demarcus Robinson was the main wide receiver, didn't even get 500 yards. Really concerning when it comes to that. Now, granted, this year was pretty bad when it comes to receiving yards, and of course Lamar Jackson was out most of it, so maybe that was kind of just a spark out there. But again, Mark Andrews was actually one of the main looks. I just clicked on Demarcus Robinson by accident, so my bad, Demarcus. We're not really talking about you right now. Mark Andrews, I mean, he's been an impressive threat. I mean, he's broken 1,000 yards before. I think he's gotten 850 yards and 847. He's been all over the place. As we will see here, he's been the main receiver for years. 1,300 yards. My bad. It wasn't even just 1,000. It was 1,300 yards. And Marquise Brown. Now, this granted was a great year from Lamar Jackson passing wise, but those two were the main guys that year, and that's kind of unusual for 80% of the threats going to two people. Usually it's kind of spread out a little bit better. Rashad Bateman, I should talk about too. He's never really broken over 600 yards, I don't believe, for this team, so we're not going to really talk about him, but he is technically the number 2 there. Mark Andrews, though, will he put up 1,300 yards? I'm not too sure. I don't think so. I think, again, he's one of those players that I think is going to be utilized very, very much. I don't know if he's going to break 1,000 yards next year. I would love to see him. I love Mark Andrews. I think he's one of my favorite tight ends in the league. But I just don't see him breaking 1,000 quite, just because, again, they're utilizing him in multiple ways. The offensive line could use his help with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson's rushing help, while Mark Andrews is also really great when it comes to red zone passes, too. So will they kind of use him for more yardage? Probably not. I think I see Zay Flowers accumulating a lot more of the long-distance yardage, especially maybe people like Rashad Bateman coming in. Or not coming in, but, getting some, bigger threats. I think that team has a large depth chart they want to use. So Mark Andrews getting 1,000 yards, definitely not unrealistic. He's definitely capable of doing it, but maybe not going to be quite the more yardage person, more of the end zone person in my mind. Again, in last year, of course, Marquise Brown kind of coming in the league. I believe this was his first year, was it? Or if not, very early on. 769 yards. Mark Andrews about 700 yards. Again, pretty much high games played. Marquise Brown was also a true wide receiver 1. I guess not at this point. I guess he was still pretty green, similar to Zay Flowers. So maybe this will be a breakout for Zay Flowers. So receiving-wise, been kind of all over the place when it comes to the receivers. They really haven't had many true number 1 receivers. Only Mark Andrews has been the main guy there. We'll talk about sacks real quick. 29 sacks from Lamar Jackson. Actually, we probably should talk about the total. Sorry, 32 sacks total. 57 total. Of course, very, very large there. Again, Lamar Jackson's not really as much Lamar Jackson's fault, so not really going to talk about that one too much. 38 sacks there, and of course, 41 sacks here. So naturally, when you have a rushing quarterback or a more improvising quarterback, you're going to be at threat for more sacks. Just inherently true. Not saying that's a bad thing. Again, I don't think sacks are a horrible stat to have, but of course they do happen and they do hurt sometimes depending on the plays. So, kind of interesting that they kind of hover around the high 30s, low 40s. We'll see where it kind of lands this next year. I got a prediction. We'll get to that later. But going to the defensive side of the ball. So, of course, I probably should at this point highlight these more. So, 60 sacks last year, along with 18 interceptions last year. Impeccable defensive year. I don't think they're going to have nearly as great of a season as they did that last year, but man, were they fucking good, and I think they're going to be even greater. I think their defensive line is going to be more run-focused, again, against a lot of other teams' run games, but I still think they're going to be impeccable in the sack game, tackles for loss, interceptions. I think their secondary is going to probably take a little bit of a setback, but definitely not too much. Looking at defense, and this is going to kind of show a little bit of the highlight here. 48 sacks right there, as you see, and 14 interceptions. Again, a little bit of a step down a little bit of step up from 2022 to 2023. Pretty good numbers still, though, from this team. Looking at this next one, 34 sacks and 9 interceptions. Again, a big step back from there. 2021 and 2020, they did not have the defense that they do now. 39 sacks, pretty good, and 10 interceptions. So around the middle ground there. 2020 was a good year as well. So very, very interesting stat lines from all the Baltimore Ravens across the board. Looking at these numbers, I think that it's likely, again, they're going to be in the upper echelon of a lot of this. I think their big question mark is going to be the receiving game for me. Where will Lamar Jackson lie? Really, it's a question mark about Lamar Jackson. How many rushing yards is he going to really do? How many receiving yards or is he going to give to these players? Will Isaiah likely step up and be even more utilized with Mark Andrews? That's the big questions we kind of have to ask. And will Derrick Henry be as relevant to this offense as people are expecting? Because I think a lot of people are expecting him to go 1,500 yards. That's really, I shouldn't say they expect him to, but I think I've seen a lot of people say they want to see him do 1,250 plus, And with him at his age, with this offense, the way it's already ran, I don't know if that's the most realistic option, to be honest with you. And I'm probably going to have a hot take here for everybody at home, but Derrick Henry's not going to be as much of a focus on this offense as people think he is. He's going to be a big threat when it comes to red zone, don't get me wrong, but how much of a threat is he really going to be? Looking again at stats, I really didn't talk about his touchdowns a whole lot, or at all. But he's had over 10 each time, and I don't think that's going to change. I think it's going to be even amplified even more. Obviously, probably not 17, but he's going to be a big, big threat when it comes to end zone because maybe Lamar Jackson will get the yards and Derrick Henry will get the end zone pushes, the end zone rushes, It's going to be a big question mark. No one can fully predict all these things, but I do have a couple different narratives I want to write, and we'll kind of get right into that now. So, of course, again, we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens going step by step through each of the positions and kind of talking about what stat lines I think each one of them are going to get. This next year, Lamar Jackson, I think, is kind of a very safe bet. I'm not going to lie, I didn't go too much out of there, except for maybe interceptions. 3,000 yards, 3,499 yards passing. I think it's pretty safe. Again, he's kind of been in that range the whole time, or at least estimated to when he wasn't injured. So I think it's just a really safe one. I don't see him going off and all of a sudden becoming a 4,000-yard passer or below 3,000. I don't see that happening. I think he's a really reliable 3,000-yard passer when he gets the opportunities to. 21 passing touchdowns. I think that's on the lower end. From all of his ones, I think he's gotten 26, 29. He's been on the ranges. I just think 21's pretty safe. I think he got 26 last year, so it's a little bit step down because obviously I don't think he's going to be MVP. It's really hard for people to go back to back really good years. So 21 passing touchdowns, pretty respectable. 750 to 800 rushing yards. Now this is a little bit down. Every year has been pretty much 1,000 plus. And this is my prediction. This is the narrative I'm writing, and we'll see it with Derrick Henry's little narrative here too. I think Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry both take a step back. Now, that isn't to say that they're going to be worse. I actually think this means they're going to be better. I think both of them are going to get a majority of their production still. So if Lamar Jackson's usually close to 1,000 rushing yards or 800, 900 yards, whatever, I still think he's going to get most of the production. I could see in probably a world that he gets 700 to 750 rushing yards, but I think 750 to 800 is what I think he can get. And I think Derrick Henry will also take a step back, probably him more than Lamar Jackson. I just think naturally they're still going to weave the narrative of Lamar Jackson still being the big rushing guy until something kind of happens, or until a scare happens, or before Lamar Jackson. I think if Lamar Jackson still feels like he can run, then he's going to run. Simple as that. So I think he's going to take less of a step back than Derrick Henry will be. But I still think both these people are going to be very, very good and very efficient. 4 rushing touchdowns, again, it's pretty, a little bit, like I said, a little bit less than his most, I think, but 4 rushing touchdowns is still pretty safe. 8 interceptions. I think Lamar Jackson is a very smart player, despite what I think maybe some narratives online are saying. I think he's a very smart, capable quarterback. I don't think he makes many mistakes. Will he? I don't think he'll break 10. I think I could see 9, if people want to get really technical. But I think 8 interceptions is a very safe stat line. Now, where my hot take comes for this whole video, and this is maybe where some people are going to kind of grill me in the comments, I'm saying that Derrick Henry does not break 1,000 yards. Now, before you do your pitchforks and all that, I get it. Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. He's a beast. He's a monster. Despite the possibility of him, being older and not being as efficient anymore, is he really the big rush? People know how to deal with him now. People have been scheming around him a lot better recently because his size. I mean, you have to scheme around Derrick Henry. I think the Baltimore Ravens are smart. They're not just going to run him to the ground. People are learning how to take on Derrick Henry a lot more. I think they have some capable running backs in Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell to kind of split some carries. I think Lamar Jackson is going to take a lot of the carries away from him. And when it comes down to it, I don't think Derrick Henry's there to be this monster to get the team 1,000 plus yards. Do I think he's going to get close? Absolutely. I think he'll be dangerously close to it. But at the same time, I just don't see a narrative where he gets 1,000 plus rushing yards. I don't see it. Now, where I do think he's going to be very efficient, and this is one of his career highs, mind you, for every Derrick Henry fan who's saying, "Oh my gosh, you don't think he's going to do well?" That's false. 13 rushing touchdowns is insane. I think that would be his second most ever, because I am so confident in them utilizing the rushing game in the red zone a whole lot more. And not with Lamar Jackson as much anymore. I think now that they can take off that from Lamar Jackson, I think Lamar Jackson can take a step back from trying to get in the end zone, where Derrick Henry can be down that back to do it. I think he's going to, and again, it's not even talking about his receiving numbers. I think Derrick Henry could possibly see more receiving touches. So this is not me saying Derrick Henry's washed and he's done. Could he break 1,000 yards? Absolutely. I don't think he gets close to that 1,100. I don't think he does. I think if he does break 1,000 yards, it's barely. And that's why he's 999. I think he'll get dangerously close, and maybe he could do it. But this is my hot take. Derrick Henry will not break 1,000 rushing yards, but I still think he's going to be a beast out there. Still think he's going to be super efficient. And, of course, all these videos don't take into account these players could be injured. Obviously, every player could be injured. I'm not going to try to say, oh, my gosh, I think Derrick Henry's going to get injured, because that's stupid to say. That's a stupid thing to even predict for people. So, there you go. Receiving yards, I mean, I just don't really have much to say here. And, of course, I realize for everybody that's OCD, do not look at this screen too much. Zay Flowers, I think he's going to hit about the same numbers he did last year. 4 receiving touchdowns, sure. It's a little bit step back from last year. Because I think Mark Andrews will be very, very efficient next year. And he probably won't break 900 yards yet. I think he'll maybe have he will have a breakout year, I hope, in the next couple of years. I just don't think this year will be it with how good their depth is. Rashad Bateman, easily the easiest prediction I got is under 700 yards. Never has done that. He probably won't be the wide receiver 2 the whole season, so we'll keep him there. Mark Andrews, I really debated putting him at 900 plus yards. I really did. I'm decided not to because I think most of his numbers have been 700 or 1300. So I wanted to put him at 900. I can't predict that with the track record he's been on recently, especially with the games he's been missing, the more he's been resting. I think it's very safe to say that I think he can get close to 900. I just cannot say that he's going to get most of it. That's why I still think that Zay Flowers actually will have more potential to get more yardage than Mark Andrews, but I think Mark Andrews will easily have more receiving touchdowns. I say he gets 7 this year. Again, I think the red zone is going to be super important for this team to get there. Once, I don't know exactly. That's a big narrative, again, is going to be how do people get to the yardage. And actually, I didn't even think about this. This is something I didn't even think about. Kickoffs are going to get, place teams in a lot better position where consistently these teams are going to be 20 yards, less to gain. So, again, the red zone is going to be so important this next year. And in my mind, I know that. But, again, how do they get close out the rest of the yardage? That's through simple passes, through simple rushes. We're going to see. It's going to be the narrative to the right. But I think the red zone will be super important for the Baltimore Ravens next year. And Mark Andrews will also be a very important part to it. And I think he'll get a couple of long touchdowns. I never know. I like Mark Andrews. He could probably do that. But that's my receiving touchdowns prediction. O-line, I put 40 to 50. I think they're going to give up a couple more this next year. Again, they're hovering around 38. This O-line is really good, but I think they are run heavy. I think a lot of the players are, more on the rushing capability side of things versus the passing. So it's not like any, it's whatever, 40 to 50 sacks, whatever. 45 to 54 sacks or 54 to 45 sacks the defense will get. I think they're going to take a step back, obviously, from 61 this previous year, but I think they'll be somewhere around the 50 mark or high 40s in terms of their sacks. Defense, 16 to 14, pretty good. 18 interceptions last year was insane, but I think they'll easily get in the 16 to 14 range. Not really going to harp on that too much. Now, this time, I did not reveal the win-loss ratio here for the Ravens yet because we're going to talk about it a little bit. Because I think this is a really hard division to predict. The Steelers have some serious capabilities that could be a big threat. Browns, obviously, every year, they're really, really good. Bengals, question mark. Will Joe Burrow be as good as he is? I'm not too sure. This whole division's a big question mark. I think easily, if you told me you say they're 3-3, 100%. If all these teams go 3-3, that's a very safe prediction for all these teams because I think they're all insane. For the Ravens, I am going to say I think they'll be 4-2. I think they could be 4-2 in their division, period. I think they could probably split with the Browns, Bengals, and beat the Steelers straight up. Again, this whole division, though, could go either way. They could, split with the Steelers and Browns and beat the Bengals all the way. I don't know. It's a hard prediction. If you want to go 3-3, 100% understand. I don't think you can reasonably predict much more like 5-1, 6-0, or 2-4, 1-5, whatever. 1-5, 0-6. I don't think you can go that extreme, but if you want to go one loss or one win more, sure, I don't care. I'm going 4-2 for the Ravens. We'll say they split the games between Chiefs and the Cowboys. So what? 5-3. Chargers, Giants, Bucks, and Texans. I say they win 3 of these games. Reason I'm saying that they, instead of just saying it's a loss to the Texans, I think they could easily beat the Texans. The Texans are also really extremely good. Bucks are extremely good. I think it's an easy couple wins that the Chargers and the Giants get get against. So I'm saying they go basically 8-4 between their away opponents and their division games, of course. I'm going to say they take an L to the Eagles. You never know with these kind of games. They could easily split them, but 8-5. And I've seen that because I'm going to kind of split it between the Eagles and Buffalo. I think they could both, split in that one. 9-5. And I think they probably could easily win these next 3 games. Now, I'm not going to say they go 3-0. I say they go 2-1, making them 11-6 for me, because I think there's a couple upsets that could happen. I think between the Chargers, Giants, Broncos, Raiders, and Washington, I think one random game will happen that they just lose. Just happen. I don't think it's going to, I think it's a reasonable prediction for that. Plus, I've already given them an extra win from the division, so I'm okay with 11-6 kind of being my base because, again, the division could go 3-3. So my official prediction is they go 10 to 11 wins this next season. Very, very respectable. I think I have 5 teams total that go 12+ wins because that's usually kind of what happens. Usually like 3 or 4 teams land in 12+, and then every now and then a 14+ team gets, in. So that's kind of my prediction. I think the Ravens are really good. I just don't think I think they'll be more consistent. I don't think they'll be as explosive as they were this last year, which is fine. They're a great team. I think I've been shitting on them a little bit too. Feels like, but this just means I think they've gotten so good. They've gotten efficient. You know how the Chiefs are scary? They don't have to have 14+ wins every year because the Chiefs are efficient. They can drop a couple games because, yeah, sometimes it happens. Sometimes when you're efficient, you sometimes blow it out of the water. 100% understand. But when you are too explosive, you just get long droughts of losing. Eagles are a great example of that. I think that's a great example there. I'm sure there's a couple other examples from last year I can think of. Cowboys come to mind when it comes to explosive games to all of a sudden just dropping them. We'll see. I'm excited to see what the Ravens can do and actually be one of the top teams I want to watch next season. So we'll see. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please like down below and comment any suggestions for future videos below. I'll see you guys later. StraightA Dawson, out of here.